rebrand is going to be revamped. But last night, a student at President Trump's rally in Phoenix took issue with the rebrand as a whole, calling this the latest example of cancel culture.
Aunt Jemima was canceled. And if you didn't know, Nancy Green, the original first Aunt Jemima, she was a picture of the American dream. She was a freed slave who went on to be the face of the pancake syrup that we love and have in our pantries today. She fought for equality, and now the leftist mob is trying to erase her legacy. And might I mention how privileged we are as a nation if our biggest concern is a bottle of pancake syrup?
I don't think that is the biggest concern. I'll put that aside as I bring in Dan Gasby here to talk about this. Dan, you started the petition drive in 2017 to get rid of the Aunt Jemima branding. You're also the co-founder of B. Smith Enterprises, which, among other things, operates a chain of restaurants. And what's your reaction, Dan, when you hear someone saying that Aunt Jemima is the American dream?
Well, it could be the American dream or the American understanding for someone who doesn't understand what it's like to be an African American or to have witnessed people call someone Aunt Jemima and the derogatory way in which it's used. It's a slur. It has been a slur to women of color, black women in particular. I've had that situation happen in my restaurant, and I've had people, both black and white, understood what it meant and escorted people who were making that derogatory comment about one of the people who happened to have worked for me. And so understanding that B felt very strongly when we were in the business of looking at the opportunities that might happen with opening a supermarket and doing some research, finding a young lady who was actually buying the product, and she didn't know who or what she was. And it bothered B because B understood what Aunt Jemima represented, as most African-American women do. And as I've said in the past, and I'll say again, there are very few, if any, African-American women that want their children to be called Aunt Jemima or want to be called Aunt Jemima themselves. So for that young lady in that rally to sit there and talk about that, she's never had anyone call her the N-word. She's never had the weight of 400 plus years of oppression. She's never had to deal with, as I say, you pay for the paint job, you know, being a person of color. And so it's easy for her from 30,000 feet and from a nice warm perspective to see that as something that warms the cockles of her heart and her history. But that history, like Robert E. Lee or like Calhoun or like Jefferson Davis, has not been one that has been for all people, and certainly not for people of African descent in America.
Okay, so y'all just heard that clip right there, and that was coming from CNN. And I wanted to address this, and actually Vicky Dillard actually did a live stream on her show talking about this topic right here. Now, I never got an opportunity to actually talk about the whole Aunt Jemima situation, and basically, in case y'all don't know, and y'all probably should already know by now, they are in the process of rebranding the Aunt Jemima brand. You know, as we all know, it has been a very popular syrup outside of Miss Butterworth. I think those are the two most popular name brand syrups that is circulating in the world today. But they're in the process of rebranding it and renaming it because I think it's owned by Quaker Oats. And, you know, giving it a new name. The recipe is most likely going to be the same, but they're going to call it another name. And you had some people that were for it, but you had people that were against it, such as this individual in the picture right here who made that very blasphemous comment. Her name is Reagan Escude. Now, we clearly can see that she is definitely palm colored, but with that name, she definitely has some Latin roots. Because that name Reagan as a first name and that Escude, that's definitely, that's definitely some Latin roots there with that name. From where, I'm not entirely sure, but that's besides the point. So she got up there and spoke at the recent Trump rally that happened in Arizona. And she basically said that Nancy Green, who was the face of the Aunt Jemima syrup, was the pinnacle of the American dream. I'm sitting here like, are you serious? See, this is the tone deafness of it all right here. This actually goes back to when Megyn Kelly got upset because HBO Max said they were going to pull Gone with the Wind down. And mind you, in that, the mammy archetype that could be seen as Aunt Jemima was in that, played by Hattie McDaniel, in which she won her Oscar for. And she got upset about that. Now here you have another palm-colored woman being upset that they're removing Aunt Jemima, or the mammy archetype, from a brand, or just being removed altogether. Notice these are two white women. We have said plenty of times before that if anybody can out-racist anybody, it's definitely a white woman being out-racist-ing, and I'm just making that up, or out-bigoting anybody. It's definitely a white woman doing that to her man. Not saying he can't be a bigot and racist himself, but she definitely is taking the crown and is soon to be taking the throne. Look at all these Karens running around here doing all this nonsense. But she stood up there and made it seem like she was the face of the American dream. Mind you, she was a slave, and they said she was a free slave. But to my knowledge, Nancy Green never got any profit from anything her face was on. That reminds me of another Green whose name was Nearest Green, a man who was enslaved at the time. He wasn't even free. He was enslaved, who came up with the recipe for Jack Daniels. For years, people thought Jack Daniels was a white branded whiskey. Found out a few years ago that a slave by the name of Nearest Green came up with the concoction for it. But because he was a slave and he was property, he couldn't own property. A property couldn't own property. And his family for years never profited off of it until it got discovered. So his family just now started profiting off of Jack Daniels whiskey. And that happened, maybe 5 years ago, if that? Not over 10 years ago. And how long has Jack Daniels been around? For decades. It's probably one of the most popular whiskeys in the world. So this woman did not profit. And I can go on to Henrietta Lacks. They use her cells called HeLa cells. That's where the name came from. In order to advance the study of cancer. And her family never profited a dime. John Hopkins was not trying to come up off of it. And I don't even know if her family is even still not profiting to this day. If they are, they just started. Just like this Nancy Green didn't profit off of it. I saw a picture of Nancy Green holding a stack of pancakes, and in the picture at the bottom, her ankles are shackled to a table. And she's just smiling. Because I guess that's, you just have to smile through the pain. And when I think of all the Mammy and Aunt Jemima things, it reminds me of an episode, and some of y'all may know which one I'm talking about, of A Different World, where Whitley was doing a Black History type program, and she brought in figurines of the Mammy, or what the Mammy was supposed to be. And Kim was very, very upset about that, because she looked aesthetically like what Mammy would be, a dark skinned kind of big bone woman, even though Kim wasn't like a obese woman, but she wasn't like a model either. And I remember toward the end of the episode, she was talking to Mr. Gaines about when she was a child and she was in some kind of a show and she was in a costume and she was somebody else. And she basically said that the person who was the MC introduced her as Aunt Jemima. And I remember she was so upset and cried. So that Aunt Jemima is not a compliment. And for this bitch right here on the screen to make it seem like it is very disingenuous and insulting. Like the man said in the clip, she doesn't understand what our ancestors had to go through and the names that we were called. So that's why it's easy for her to see this as a compliment when she says that she was living the American dream. No, she was not. No Black person back then was living what was quote unquote the American dream. You had some that were able to, be able to be and find success. But look at what they had to go through to get it. They had to go through people that looked like her to get what they had to get, while people that look like her didn't have to go through shit. Not saying that none of them had to really go through anything, but let's be real here. Our ancestors went through pure hell to get the success that they had, and then had to go through more to try to keep it. We've heard the stories about how probably her ancestors, or people who are descendants of Europeans, who have stolen land that black people have worked on to preserve and to pass down through generations. You want to know why black people don't have generational wealth? It's not because they squandered the money. It's a combination of integration and palm-colored people stealing the land. Richard Spencer, or as I call him, Bitchard Spencer, came out and basically said that his family owns lands that was once owned by black people that they stole. He said it. He admitted it. If it's one thing I can say about Richard Spencer, he's a very honest racist, and I love when they're honest. I love when they're overt and not covert. I like the conservative racists. At least they're telling me about themselves up front, instead of trying to hide behind a mask and trying to make it seem like they are not this way when they really are. That's the one I can agree with. We won't be friends and nothing like that, but at least now I understand where you're coming from, and I don't have to try to figure you out. But people like her, Megyn Kelly, the Saltine Queen, Laura Ingraham, Gretchen Carlson, basically all the chicks over at Fox News, they all have the same type of mindset. And I won't be surprised if she's campaigning right now to get a job over there, or try to be the press secretary for 45. Like, she really thought she was doing something with the statement that she made when she wasn't saying a goddamn, just a bunch of bullshit. But if we was to get up there and say some stuff about their ancestors, they would pull a plug on our ass like that. And we could come with facts. And notice how they love to big up certain individuals in our community that we would be considered as an insult. But when we push back and say, how could you say that? That's insulting. That's not a compliment. Then it's somehow we're being liberal. We're being leftist. We need to get over it. They always do that shit. They always think they know what's good for us. They always think they know what's best for us, as if we are their child. Trust and believe, if I had to be the child to one of these fools, I would either run away or find a way to set my own damn self up for adoption. I couldn't live under that type of roof. When I think about the type of things that come out of people's mouths, like the stuff that came out of her mouth or anyone else like that, I wonder what their childhood was like. What was their living conditions like when they were growing up? I probably wouldn't be able to handle it. But that's why I say we live in a very us versus them society. That's how it always has been, and it will always be. When black people as a collective actually understand that, then maybe we'll actually get somewhere. But first, you have to know who your enemy is. I do not appreciate what she said. Neither should you. And to go back, I'm going to add this one last thing. I have to go back when I said about the two white women, Megyn Kelly and this chick right here. Like I said, Megyn Kelly got upset that they pulled Gone with the Wind from HBO Max, basically saying that it was an American treasure, it was a classic movie, whatever. And like I said, in that movie, one of the primary characters was the mammy played by Hattie McDaniel. This woman right here is upset that they are using cancel culture for Aunt Jemima's face on a bottle of syrup. To the black feminists out there, do you see what's going on? These two white women, and not just them, but many of them, are saying almost blatantly, it's kind of covert, but almost blatantly, that they only choose to see you in very subservient positions. But many of you will not see it that way, unfortunately. But that's basically what they're telling you. There's no way you're going to stand in their spotlight. They will prefer you to be in the background and only in the background. I'm going to need you to wake the fuck up and realize these bitches do not give a damn about you.